In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to create a course schedule in Microsoft Word using a table so that it is accessible for a student with blindness using a screen reader. A screen reader is a piece of software that a student with blindness or with some other type of visual disability uses to have digital content on a screen read to them. And so when we create a course schedule, it's important for us to format it in a way that the screen reader can read it in a logical way. So if you choose to use a table as a way to structure your course schedule in Word, then there are several considerations to keep in mind. And I will walk you through that in this video. So we're in the Home tab in Microsoft Word, and we want to go to the Insert tab, and we're going to go to Table and click on Table. And we could create the table by using the grid or by clicking on Insert Table, which is what I'm going to do. And here we can determine the number of columns we want. In this case, I'm going to say 2. And then the number of rows, I'm going to say 6 to get started. And then I'm going to say OK. And then there's some formatting things that I want to do for mine. I'm going to select all the cells. I'm going to go back to my Home tab. I want to make my font 14 point. I'm happy with Calibri. It's well known as a very readable font, so I'm going to stick with that. The other thing that I'm going to change, it doesn't mean you have to do this, but I typically do in a table, is I'm going to change the cell margins. The cell margins are the space between the text and the cell walls or the borders. I want there to be some space in between the fonts and the borders of the cells so it improves readability for our sighted students. So I'm going to select all the cells as I have here, and then in any cell I'm going to do a right click on my mouse and I'm going to go down to Table Properties. And in Table Properties, I'm going to go over to the Cell tab, which I'm on right now, and I'm going to go down to the bottom right-hand corner and click on Options. And here I'm going to unclick Same as the whole table. And you'll notice that the left and the right cell margins are set at 0.08 inches, and I want that for my top and bottom margins. And again, the reason why I'm doing this is because with a little bit more white space between the top and bottom margins in the fonts, it's going to greatly improve the readability for the sighted students. So I'm going to say OK on that, and then I'm going to say OK on that. And now we have our table. I'm going to grab a hold of the border in the middle here, and I'm going to slide it over because this is going to be where I have my weeks and dates, or my weeks. And here's where we'll have our learning activities. But I want to go over a couple of considerations when we talk about the cells in the table themselves. So one common practice that many instructors engage in when they format course schedule in a table in Microsoft Word is they'll identify various weeks or modules by merging two cells together and calling it like week 1, for example. And the way they do that is we click on a right click on the mouse, and then they would go down to merge cells. So, and maybe you have a syllabus yourself that's like this. And while this is fine for sighted students, this presents a big problem for students who have blindness or some other visual disability and they rely on a screen reader. It's going to interrupt the screen reader's ability to read the course schedule coherently. So we do not want merged cells or split cells within our table. We want just the same number of columns and rows without any split or merged cells. So I'm going to delete this particular cell, or you could split it. So we'll resplit it into two cells, and then I'll have to drag this over back here. Okay. So that's a word of warning about cells. Don't merge them. Don't split them. A row should only have a row of the same number of cells, and that's it. Just composed of one row of cells, no split cells, no merged cells across rows or columns. So the first thing we want to do is establish our header row. The header row would be the categories that the columns are. So in this case, let's call this weeks and dates, or you could just say weeks. And then this next one, we'll call it learning activities. And I am going to select this row. The first thing I'm going to do is I like to have that centered, and for formatting purposes for the sighted students, I'm going to bold it. But I want to set these as a header row. And what that means is that as the screen reader reads the cells down here, it's going to identify that this information in here is a week and date, and that when it's reading in this cell, it's going to identify it as being in this column, learning activities. And so as a student using a screen reader navigates through the table to find a particular learning activity or a particular week or date, it'll be easier for them to toggle through and find the information they're looking for if this is set as a header row. So the way that you set a header row in Microsoft Word is, again, you select the entire row, and then you're going to do a right click on your mouse and go down to Table Properties. And then you're going to go to the Row tab. And the changes that you want to make in this case is you want to uncheck Allow Row to Break Across Pages, and then you want to click on Repeat as Header Row at the top of each page. And once you've done that, you say OK, and then voila, this will be your header row. So what are some things that we can do inside here to demonstrate how this would be formatted or would work? So let's say, for example, I got weeks and dates here. I'm going to call this week 1, and then I'm going to do an enter, and then I'm going to basically list the date range. So in this case, let's call this the first week of the semester in September, 9/6 to 9/10. And that would be the first week. And maybe the second week, week 2, the date range would be 9/11 to, let's say, 9/18. All right, now you notice that I'm saying to rather than dash, and that is because a screen reader is going to read this particular cell as week 1, 9/6 to 9/10. They have some other settings. They might be able to set it to read it slightly differently. And you could put dash there, and that's fine. It would just say dash, but I like to put 2 in there because it'll read it out as 2. For a sighted student, if they see a dash, they'll be thinking in their mind, well, that's 9/6 to 9/10. So I like to put 2 in there. So far as how you could format your learning activities for that week, including a bulleted list might be an option you want to consider. So for example, I could have a discussion, introduce yourself, as one of the learning activities that the students need to do. And then I can put the due date on here within parentheses. And then once you hit enter, you can hit you can enter the next assignment. So let's call that syllabus scavenger hunt. And we'll make that due also on 9/10. And again, as the student with the screen reader begins to toggle through and navigate through this table, they'll always be able to know that if they're in this column here, that they're in weeks and dates, and if they're in this column here, they're looking at the learning activities, right? And you can do the same thing here. We'll call this assignment 1. We could make that due. I'm going to just copy and paste this, 9/18. All right. So the whole point is, in order for your table in Microsoft Word to be accessible to a student using a screen reader, you have to, there's some things you don't want to do, and then there's some things you need to do. So the things that you need to do is you need to make sure that you have a header row, no matter how many columns you decide to use. You don't exactly have to follow this format, but you do want to keep in mind that you're trying to provide the student using a screen reader with an efficient formatting so that they can toggle through and navigate the table efficiently. And the way you do that is you have a header row so that it identifies what column they're in at any given time. Additionally, you want to avoid using split cells within a column, and you want to avoid using merge cells within a column or a row as well. So those are the things that need to be done in order to create or modify a table that's being used as a course schedule.